Hello, it's Scott Manley here, continuing my obsession with really ginormously huge rockets. Or, well, really big dumb rockets. Anyway, the whole point of this, of course, is the promise that I made you all. I believe that I should commit myself to the goal of, before this hour is out, landing a Kerbal on the moon and returning him safely to Kerbin. No task has proven itself more difficult, more challenging, or more full of giant explosions than this one. So, hopefully, however, it isn't all wearing thin, because I think I've finally cracked it with this design. Mostly. I made some little modifications internally to it, added some more struts, obviously to strengthen it against, well, disintegrating under its own force. 18,000 tons at launch. And, you know, I was realizing that is bigger and heavier than the Saturn V, but it's not bigger and heavier than the largest rocket ever seriously studied. Yes, the Sea Dragon, originally designed in 1962, but I'll talk more later after I deal with this particular staging incident. So it turned out that I hadn't quite got my clearances right, and as you see, I lost some rockets. So I thought I could keep it under control, but then, no, I decided... You see me deactivating engines to try to bring it back onto some sort of sane and sensible trajectory, triggering a roll maneuver, hoping that the natural torque would perhaps bring it firing in roughly the right direction. But then I just gave up, ditched that stage, and thought, well, you know, I'm actually going pretty fast. So why don't I just continue on to the moon and see how well I do? I mean, after all, at this stage, I still had 22 kilometers per second of delta V available to me. More than enough to send me to the moon and bring me home at about 7 kilometers per second for each leg of the trip. I mean, a quick back-of-the-envelope calculation, well, it had to be very quick because I'm flying this, it still said that it was potentially close as to whether I'd be able to do it in this time, so I figured, why not? It would be far more dramatic if I was to complete this challenge and beat the record, or beat my personal record, in a crippled spacecraft. But the challenge still remains formidable. We have about 11,000 kilometers worth of space to cover in as little time as possible. But really, I need this mission to collect test data on how well this thing decelerates during the final lunar approach phase. Now, as you might have seen, it has a nuclear engine on there for the return. That will take a bit of time to get up to speed, but that's been set up to basically fire all the time, providing high efficiency thrust. Unfortunately, it's not really powerful enough, and yeah, the descent didn't quite go to plan there. Poor Dudas Kerman. Oh, wait, no, he's still alive! He is skittering across the surface in his capsule. Which, okay, he's hopefully not going to die, because that would be really unfortunate. He's skimming along there. I think we're doing okay. We just need to let this speed bleed off. He is going downhill, but providing he doesn't hit the ground. Oh, no. Okay, wait, no, that's just solar panels. Oh, he's still alive. He's still alive. And maybe there's enough delta V in those. Oh, okay, well, never mind. Yeah, Dudas Kerman. Okay, so yeah, back to data collection, and this is the actual another descent that I tried. Remember, this is a crippled rocket, so we're not going to be going quite as fast. The other thing you'll notice is I didn't really have the asparagus fever, let's say, for that initial stage. No, the asparagus fever only kicks in for this stage here. One of the downsides of the asparagus staging here is that you start to run out of landing legs. The landing legs are of course attached to those tanks, and they of course serve to spread the weight around, perhaps make the thing a little more stable. But if you're dropping those, you then have to be a little more careful. It also became apparent that I was coming down right on the edge of a crater, and they're not necessarily the best place to land on account of them not being particularly flat. So I made some a shift over there to make sure I landed in the right place. Suicide burn, and wait for it. Oh yes, a little bit of an explosion, but time to go home. And no, I said go home. Wait a second, why are you turning around? I need you to go up. That's right, up. No, oh wait, no, he's that's it, he is confused. He is pointed at the ground. Turn around! Quick! 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 Go up! Okay, now we're ready to go home. So, yeah. Second major mistake there. I probably wasted about 100 meters per second of delta V there. That was rather unfortunate. Well, it's a good thing I'm making all these mistakes now, because I will be able to correct for them in the actual mission after the fact. So of course you come down, you're going to make sure that you go a little to the east if you're coming off of the near side of the moon. That will cancel out the orbital velocity of the moon and make sure that you actually head towards the surface. Head towards Kerbin. Head directly to Kerbin. Do not pass Minmus. Do not collect 200 science. So yeah, this is one of the downsides of this spacecraft. With that nuclear engine, it takes a really long time to actually get yourself up to speed. But it does give you so much more delta V, and it kind of works out. I did some like back of the envelope calculations, and I think this is actually the faster way to do things. As long as you're not starting with the nuclear engine off of the lunar surface, if you've already got a few kilometers per second from more powerful engines, that nuclear engine will get your approach time down to under about 15 minutes. And then we ditch this stage, and I throttle down purposely because I want to fire this. Now you might have noticed one other thing. My mission clock got reset because this is not the root part. So suddenly my mission clock got reset. But thanks to the magic of action replay, I can tell that the clock switched over at 48 minutes and 30 seconds. So the fact that I am at 17 minutes and just about to pass through 18 minutes means I haven't beaten the target. However, I have beaten my previous best time by at least 3 minutes, and that was with a crippled rocket. If the mission could go off to plan, then I know we can do it, and off we go. So yes, 18,000 tons just happens to be the mass of the Sea Dragon rocket, which began design in 1962 as it was essentially an interesting concept. It was built out of heavy materials. They didn't really care for space age high-tech stuff. They wanted something that was essentially a big dumb rocket, and it was big. It was designed to be floated at sea, and it would be fueled by an aircraft carrier that would essentially take water and split it into hydrogen and oxygen, fuel the fuel tanks. And then when it got time to launch, they would have ballast tanks that would suck in the water, and the whole thing would essentially submerge, go underwater, and then they would launch it from out of the water. It didn't have fancy turbo pumps. The engines were all fed by the tanks being pressurized. It was built of like plate steel, and it would comfortably fit the Saturn V in its first stage alone. They figured out that they could launch about 550 tons into low Earth orbit, and their numbers actually made it cheaper. It looked like on paper it would be cheaper than any launch system to date. Of course, they then came along at that time when the Apollo program was being wound down and the future projects were being cancelled because, the US had gone to the moon. What was it going to do next? They had this war in Vietnam to fight. So unfortunately, the world was spared many of these bat poop crazy concepts that the scientists come up with when they have plenty of time, lots of similar minded people, an ample supply of coffee, and of course a fertile environment. That's when we get the true awesomeness of rocket science. Anyway, in an effort to prevent the second stage boosters from falling into the rocket and damaging it, I just decided let's spin the thing up rather than adjusting the structure. And let's see what happens. Does it come clear? Does it? Yes, it does. So that's us through one of our major disasters. If you remember, there's potentially the next stage I've had issues with all those double engine rockets there. So of course I spin that up as well to try and make sure that everything is clear and we can continue to the moon as quickly as possible. And the moment of truth has passed and we are really on a clear and free trajectory. From this point on, we've tested it, we know it works. It's just a question of how much speed we can put into the engine, we can put into the spacecraft for its final approach to the moon. Now, it's also interesting to note that with 22 kilometers per second of delta V left at this point, I could almost certainly do this multiple times. I could probably go to the moon, to Kerbin, and back more than once, I think, with this design. I wouldn't fancy trying to land it on Kerbin, but I think that I'm sure it's perfectly possible if I try it. And of course, we always have access to quick saves. Actually, I mean, beyond this simple flying to the moon really fast mission, there are other things I can attempt to do with this. I was thinking I could attempt to return to Kerbin as fast as possible, and the way you would do that is you would put yourself into a near escape trajectory from the Kerbal system, then you would bring yourself down as close to Kerbal as possible, burn all your fuel, and as you run out of fuel, you would be lined up to arrive at Kerbin. Very hard to do, and given how long it takes to actually light up these engines and fire them, I'm probably not going to do that. Now, another thing you could do with this epic rocket is you could try and set a record for a round Kerbin trip. Normally, of course, you get up into orbit, and if you travel too fast, of course, then you go up into higher orbit, and your orbital period actually goes down. So what you'd have to do is accelerate and then point your engines down towards the ground, and then you could actually orbit at higher than orbital velocity and therefore go around Kerbin maybe in 20 minutes. I don't know, it'd be interesting to find out just how long that could go on for. I'm going to have to give it a go at some point, but right now, there we go. We have modified this to add asparagus-style staging to these mainsail engines. It does have a little bit of a problem with rotations getting picked up because initially those are all strutted together, but as soon as we lose one, we lose the bracing struts and they tend to wobble a little, as you see. Those last two I've set up to not have their gimbals enabled. Now, I did this originally using 6-way symmetry. It is possible to split apart stages in the staging diagram. If you don't know, you can right-click on items in the staging to select and deselect them and then drag them out. That's how I arranged this thing. In fact, I made some changes to the staging in flight, or at least I verified my staging was working. So, yeah, I had to start firing a little earlier than I thought because the asparagus staging, it doesn't reach the super high levels of deceleration you get from having all 6 engines firing at once with almost no fuel left. So, if you watch your suicide burn level, you think you're doing fine and then suddenly you find it going too fast. And so, in the end, we come down and suicide burn, and come on, look, we've got 32 minutes on the clock. We just need to burn this off and land gently. Oh, don't fall over. Excellent. Well, I think we can actually pause for a moment. Relax, enjoy the view. Lock onto a beacon back on Kerbin. Okay, there we go. Moon Puncher ready to leave. Throttle to 100% and point ourselves at Kerbin. And now it's just a mad race home, and we've seen this before. We know how it happened. You've seen it in the previous stuff. It's really time for me to stop yammering, sit back, relax, and, revel in my moment of victory with some music. 50 seconds. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Praise Jebediah. Finally. Oh, finally. I can hold my head high once more. Wow. 334 G's deceleration through the atmosphere. That is one of the hardest tasks I have ever set myself in this game, and on paper it's easy, you just keep adding boosters, but the editor kept on not working in weird ways. The engineer thing would stop misbehaving, and yeah, you know, when you had a rocket with 1,400 parts, the computer would render it with all the speed and swiftness of continental drift. I am glad never to have to fly that again. I'm Scott Manley. Fly safe.